All right, let's get into it. I'm Dave Sharp, marketing coach for architects at vanityprojects.com.
I'm Arnaud Marthouret, architectural photographer and marketing and business development specialist at rvltr.studio.
And Arno and I, over the last year or so, we catch up every month and we talk about what the latest stuff is in marketing and branding and strategy for architects. And we thought, well, why don't we start making a series of videos? So we're going to be putting out a video each month. And this time we decided to focus on marketing systems and tools because we both love apps and tools and products and all that sort of thing. So we're going to do
Indeed.
our top five. These are things that we use ourselves or we recommend to our clients. And Arno, do you want to start with what's your number five?
Yeah, so number five is LinkedIn. And the reason why it's my favorite of what you would call social platforms is because that's the only one I'm on anymore. I've deleted Twitter, I've deleted Facebook. I still have my Instagram account, but it's been dormant for a year and a half. So LinkedIn is the only platform I'm active on. And for me personally, it makes sense because as a service provider and looking to work with architects and designers, it makes sense to be on this platform. So um, with a caveat that for architects and designers, depending on the industry or the sector you're in, it may not be the best platform. But for anyone who does business to business service providing, say you sell your architectural services to commercial firms, you do offices, large commercial buildings and things like that, I think it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it's also can be quite good for connecting with potential referral sources or other people that you could collaborate with on projects as well. Not necessarily just like end clients. So architects could connect with people in planning, landscape, urban design, like you name it, property, like buyers representatives, all sorts of people in the different sort of the chain of how people get into new homes or whatever. So yeah, it's a lot of really good options. Like I personally, like I don't really care about Instagram anymore. For me, I don't. My Instagram account is like completely dormant. Don't really care about Twitter. Don't really care about Facebook. Like LinkedIn's like the only real social media platform as a business that I use. So I'm with you 100%. Um,
Good. So what's your number five?
so my number five is a product called Nitro Pack, and it's a little bit of an SEO tool. I put out a post like 6 months ago that I put so much work into on how you can get your website to be so fast that you will be able to start improving your rankings in Google because it's becoming so important to Google that your website is fast. And there were so many steps in this post and it was really complicated. And then all of a sudden this tool came out called Nitro Pack, which you install. It takes like 10 seconds and it immediately makes your website 100 out of 100 score for Google page speed. So it's a bit of a premium tool. It does cost about $30 a month. So, but if you're serious about SEO, that's small potatoes, and it makes such a big difference. And so it's made it so easy to make your website fast. The only downside is it doesn't work for Squarespace websites. It only works for WordPress. So that's going to limit some practices, but a lot of people are going to be able to use it.
Damn, I was going to ask you where do I sign up, but I'm on
Yeah, yeah.
Squarespace, so I
Yeah, no,
can't
it
use it.
doesn't. But like maybe eventually it will work for Squarespace or something. It's like a pretty new app, so hopefully at some point. But yeah, at the moment, if you're with WordPress and you're SEOing, then yeah, absolutely you need to get Nitro Pack.
Yeah, so for me, my number four is interestingly enough SEO. And the reason I have to put that disclaimer out there is that I know absolutely jack shit about SEO. I'm in the process of learning, but I've also realized how important it is through you and a number of other people who are huge advocates of SEO. So I've started educating myself. I'm still a complete noob, but I think for anyone who takes online marketing seriously, it's a must have. And it's also a marathon. It's not something you're going to fix in a week or two. It's something you're going to fix over months and years. And eventually you will get results. But if you rank on the first page, it's a must have. So I would encourage, there's a couple of resources that I've dove into. One is Backlinko. I think you mentioned it to
Yeah,
me, and the other one
backlinko.
is Neil Patel. He's got a huge resource online. I think it's neilpatel.com, and
Mm-hmm.
there's another associated business but a different name. But if you Google Neil Patel, you'll find him. It's very daunting and it's scary, but I think it's something that's necessary for anyone who takes online marketing seriously.
Yeah, so Backlinko, um, is a series of, I guess, like really in-depth blog posts that they're so in-depth though that they're really, it's almost like a book that's free online. And yeah, I think that's like the absolute best resource for anybody who wants to actually develop their understanding about SEO. With really updated, relevant content. A lot of the stuff that you read about SEO is pretty out of date. If something was written like a couple of years ago, it's already irrelevant a lot of the time.
Mm,
But Backlinko, they really keep their stuff like very up to date. So that is actually a really good tool. But I like that you're using SEO as your tool or your system, because it is, yeah, it's an area that can make a really big difference, but it is quite complicated. You definitely want to learn about it though, and that's why I like that you picked a resource. As an architect or a small business owner, you want to understand it before you start trying to get somebody to do it for you. Because if you don't really understand what they're doing for you, you're not really going to be sure if you're getting any value if you're working with an SEO person. So it's good to read some resources and learn from it.
yeah, absolutely. And I think even if you don't end up doing any SEO work yourself, having a
Yeah.
basic knowledge of it will help you pick the right person to do it for you.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Or like what you're even trying to do. It'll also help you pick up some red flags. Like quite often, I'll be working with a client and they might have an existing SEO agency, and then I'll see something that they are doing or vice versa haven't done that's just like a really big red flag that they're probably not taking care of that client properly. So if you go through something like Backlinko, you can kind of get like a broad kind of like just basic understanding of what the essentials are, and then when those are not apparent, you can kind of go, hey, I smell a rat, there's something weird about this. So I'm obviously coming from a very distrusting place in the SEO space, but definitely important because SEO is an expensive investment for so many architects. We spend $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month, whatever. We can spend a lot of money on it. It's important to make sure that it's working properly. um,
yeah.
so
So
my next so my
what's your
next tool is kind of like it's called Mailchimp Journeys. So everyone has Mailchimp, everybody has a Mailchimp or something like that. But there is a area of Mailchimp called Journeys where you can set up an automated sequence of emails. It's what happens. You set a trigger, so when somebody joins our list or when somebody is tagged something or whatever you want to start off with, you can create a series of emails and space them out by a predetermined amount of time, 7 days, 2 weeks, however often you want to send these emails. And it's a really, really good tool because it lets you not have to worry so much about constantly creating new email newsletters, because you always worry if somebody joins our list, that's when they're the most interested in our practice, and that's when we really want to be emailing them. But if we don't have a newsletter plan that month, that's going to be a long time until they get another email. So Mailchimp Journeys are a way that you can set up automatic emails that only the people that join the list will get, and the rest of your list will not. So it's really handy for like introducing people to your practice. I'm always pushing people to set up these automated email sequences.
Mhm.
They're very popular in marketing at the moment, but they are really good. You could send them like some of your best projects. If there's been like a couple of articles about you, you could send those as well. If you've written a couple of articles or made a couple of videos, you could set up a couple of emails and send those to them as well. So by the time they actually contact you, they already like know your practice very well, which is what we really want to see. So
Mhm.
I like Mailchimp Journeys. Every single tool like for email has one of these automation things, but I think Mailchimp's one is like pretty good. So that's number
Yeah,
4 for
and
me.
I think that's a great tool and great advice on how to use it. As someone who blogs every day and sends a newsletter every day, I don't personally feel the need of using
No,
that
you
tool
don't need
that
to.
much.
No, you don't need
Although
to.
I
Yeah.
did set up an email sequence for any new subscriber,
Yeah.
but it just doesn't really make sense to me because I send stuff out so much. Like everyone who's on my newsletter either gets a daily email or
Yeah.
weekly email. So at the worst, they get an email every week. So
Yeah.
it's not really needed, but I think it's a great tool. And generally speaking, email marketing is amazing. And what I wanted to add to that kind of overall aspects or tool that's in our arsenal is also using RSS to email. And so
RSS to email. Yep.
if you have a blog that you post on with any regularity, you can set up an RSS to email campaign in your Mailchimp, and you're literally setting it up once and never have to worry about it ever again unless you want to
Yeah,
change it.
that's true. That's actually a really good idea. I've got this website called All the Architecture, which is just like a daily like architecture news website, and every day it sends a daily Mailchimp email from that RSS thing, and it's great. It goes out every day, and I don't have to do anything. So I think that's also really really good advice. If they do have a blog, if they don't have a blog though, it's probably not going to be as easy for them to use the RSS stuff. But yeah, it's still really really handy. Is that your number 3 then?
No, it wasn't. I mean, it was kind of, I'm going to mention blogging later, but you can kind of roll it into one. I think the number 3 for me is podcasts. As someone, and you have put your share of podcasts out too. Yeah. But as someone who've done a lot of podcasts and is now producing podcasts for other clients as well, there's something about the audio medium and the ability to tell stories. Although what I'm doing is strictly interviews, I don't necessarily tell stories. It's very compelling medium, and you can listen to it when you're doing your dishes or driving or you're running in the morning. So it kind of expands the realm of places that people consume your content, because if you just write on your blog, people can't read that when they're driving, but if you put a podcast out with someone who's interesting, they can listen to that when they're driving. So it's kind of one extra way to get into people's minds. I think it's very very difficult to have a podcast that is big enough to generate any kind of revenue or anything like that, but for the kind of people we're talking about and discussing these things with, it's not necessarily the point. It's more about putting content that's interesting and is going to make them look like they know what they're doing and they have something interesting to say. So that's why podcasts are interesting to me.
Yeah, I've got a couple of clients that are like starting podcasts at the moment, architects, and I've got a couple that already have them. They're awesome. They're such a good way to create content, conversational, kind of generous as well, right? Like you are, a lot of the time you do involve a guest, you can collaborate on things with other people, you can talk to people from other disciplines, and it can be a really easy way to make content as well. Writing is very time consuming. Writing's great because it helps to clarify your thinking. So I think some of the best content ultimately still needs to be written, but very good consumable content where you're not necessarily clarifying your thinking, but you're kind of expressing it or expanding on it. Podcasts are really good for doing that. I love making podcasts. I've completely almost like stopped writing blog posts because I just prefer spending time working on my podcast. I just really like it.
Yeah. And the benefit of podcasts is that you can super easily have them transcribed. There's even like AI tools. There's one, I forget the name, it escapes me right now, but there's an AI tool where you can upload your audio content. It's going to transcribe everything. You can just go through the writing, correct the mistakes, and then boom, you have a blog post ready.
So that one's called, I think that's called Descript. Descript.
That's right. That's
Descript. Yeah. And not only does Descript help you get the transcript, but it allows you to edit the audio without knowing how to edit audio. So it creates the transcript of the podcast or of the interview, whether it's video or audio, it doesn't matter. And you can just delete words or paragraphs and it will just take those out of the video and take those out of the audio. And it will also, you could take a paragraph of your speaking and you can move it down 3 paragraphs and it will take that audio and it will move it into that section and blend it in there. So it's like perfect. I love it. Before I started paying somebody to edit my podcast, I was editing it using Descript, like without any knowledge of how to use audio editing stuff. And it was like totally fine. No one even commented on my editing. So I think Descript is amazing. In fact, I might even replace that as my number 3, because my number 3 was going to be later.com for Instagram scheduling and social media scheduling. It's just probably the tool that I recommend the most to people, because all the time I'm being asked, what do I recommend in terms of what should people be using to schedule their social media. And
Yeah.
I just feel that Later is like a pretty great option, and I use it.
Later.
Yeah,
Later.
Later. Yep.
Okay.
Later.
Um.
And it's great. So
Yeah, I discovered Buffer recently.
yeah.
No, is it? Yeah, Buffer.
Yep.
I use it. I only schedule LinkedIn posts. So, and because I'm cheap as fuck, I use the free version of Buffer, and
Yeah.
that's perfect for my needs. But
Yeah.
yeah, maybe later is worth checking out too.
Yeah. What's your number two?
My number two. So it's not one thing. It's blogging and writing.
Mm,
But in a broader sense, it's writing as a way to clarify your ideas and convey to other people what your thinking is like. So that includes blogging. I recently took a copywriting course, which was a revelation to me. I learned so much,
which
and
one?
it was the Kimbo
Oh,
course.
okay. Seth Godin's one. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, fantastic. Like worth. It wasn't even that expensive. It was about $500, but it was worth its weight in gold. It's
Yeah.
just amazing teaching, amazing community. I can't recommend any of Akimbo's workshops. They're amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, like learn to write better, and there's no substitute for practice. That's it. I've been writing consistently for 3 years now, and the only way to get better is to write regularly. And you
Yeah.
don't have to write a ton, but 1,000 words a week, or even no, like say 750 words a week or so, like between 750 and 1,000 words. Sounds like a lot, but once you get used to it, it's actually pretty easy.
Hmm.
Practice makes it a lot easier. Um, but yeah, I've had the challenge with writing is that there's a huge learning curve. It's very steep at the beginning, but once you get past that, and you have a discipline, my personal discipline is Monday is my writing day. So I have 5 to 15 blog posts that are written at any point in time. On Mondays, I edit them. That's the first thing I do. I go back to everything that's written, edit it for ready for posting, and then I write. And I write a minimum of 5 blog posts for the week. And then those that I've written that day, they can sit for a few days a week and then be edited later. And then the last step is to post them all at once. So I schedule them for my blog for every day of the work week.
Yeah.
And then I go to Buffer and schedule them for reposting on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So it took me a while to find that discipline, but I find that when I do it all at once, I can knock it all down in 2 or 3 hours instead of like saying, oh, I got to write half an hour every day, but then it takes 15 minutes to get into it. And
Yeah.
then you procrastinate and then you do that. And then when you'd say, okay, 3 hours on Monday, it's my writing, editing, and posting time. You don't fuck around, you get it done. And I will say that the copywriting course, as kind of an aside to writing, has made me more creative. Like I was quite proud of myself today. I wrote a blog post on making espresso, and how I'm not going to tell you how, but I related that somehow to marketing and communications for architects and designers, and it was a really satisfying process to write something that was creative but at the same time had something to say.
Yeah.
And was, I think, funny at the same time, but I'm biased, obviously.
Yeah.
And I would never have been able to do this kind of thing if I hadn't taken the copywriting course, because that really taught me how to take the reader on a journey that's actually going to be interesting to them.
Yeah.
Like, copywriting is about what people want to hear, not what you have or want to say. And so it's you don't always succeed, but it's a trial and error process where you write a few things, you see how people respond, and then you can go on to the next one.
Yeah.
But yeah, blogging, copywriting is a huge one for me.
I think it's an important thinking exercise in general. I think developing your thinking as an architect is like a fundamental to beginning the process of improving your marketing. You're not going to be able to create any content if there isn't some very well put together thought behind it. You don't want to be like marketing in a kind of thoughtless way, or writing in a thoughtless way, or blogging or podcasting in a thoughtless way. You actually want to have, what are my ideas? And that's going to take work to work through those. And writing as an exercise will help you to do that. And you'll become better at communicating it. And something that I've picked up from my podcast with a lot of architects I really admire is that a lot of them write a lot about their work, and they don't even necessarily share it. They're privately writing as a way of trying to like make their ideas more distilled and easier to understand. It doesn't just help them as in terms of their own design process, but also communicating with their clients, communicating with their team, communicating to a authority who's going to approve the planning for the building. Like all of those things, they find that writing helps them to do that. So obviously it's challenging to begin like a writing process, but maybe taking a course like Akimbo or there are a few more out there that are really like engineered towards this idea of writing more frequently. And I think there's some good examples. So if anyone's interested, just get in touch with us. We could probably point you towards a couple more as well. But that might be a good place to start in terms of getting you to help develop that habit with some other people that are going to help you, that are going to be trying to do the same thing at the same time, which I think starting a writing habit on your own is harder than just doing it with other people. It's kind of like joining a gym, right? So, okay, my number 2 is, I love how we're going like areas of marketing and then like products or tools, right? So on this one, I'm actually thinking Calendly or its main competitor, Savvy Cal. Both of these are calendar booking apps. I think they're just like absolutely super important marketing tools to have, to put on your website or to put anywhere else to allow people to book short amounts of your time in a really efficient, automated way without you having to spend time scheduling. That is so important. And to actually open up your calendar a little bit and make it easier for people to speak to you. Of course, like traditionally having your phone number on your website and them just picking up the phone, like who needs Calendly when they could just call you? But that's not really what we want to have happen too much. Like that's more of a distraction than anything. What we really want to do is have like an organized calendar, but have specific time. And then I think it's really good to get kind of creative with how you set up those events on your Calendly. It doesn't just have to be like a 10-minute call. You could actually develop specific types of like consultations or workshops or whatever. Create something more novel, something where you're actually going to be specific about how you're going to add value in that meeting, or exactly what the purpose or the outcome of that meeting is, that just goes beyond, a chat or a conversation. And I think I've seen lots of examples of architects who have done that, and then they're getting a lot more interest, a lot more leads, engagement, just by having one of these calendar apps. So Calendly, SavvyCal, they're a game changer. I love them. They're going to fit really nicely with the number 1 tool that I'm going to mention as well. So that's it for me on that.
Well, I use Calendly all the time, but you're someone who schedules a lot of time slots to talk to people remotely. So Calendly is even more useful for someone like you. But for me to schedule, I have kind of 3 main types of events that I schedule through Calendly, and it's very easy for me to send a link, and then the clients can pick the time slot that works for them the best. I mainly use it for ongoing project work that needs a quick check-in, or for prospect meetings, like I meet a new prospect and I want to review a proposal with them, or I want to have our first meeting and kind of get to know each other. It's very useful. Do you ever find that people are resistant to using it, and they say, oh, it's not convenient, or you don't have anything available for 2 weeks and things like that?
Yeah, no. So I find the opposite. I actually find that I get way more contacts with Calendly than I do through even more simpler contact forms or methods, right? So I recently ran an experiment where for a couple of months, I didn't have any Calendly on my website. It just said, fill out a contact form or tell me about your situation, like most of us have on our website. So I did that for 2 months. And then for now, what I'm doing is I'm using a 15-minute calendar event kind of all over my website. Like my main call to action is book a call, click here, use Calendly. And I would say I've seen almost a 5 times increase in inquiries, and it could just be a coincidence, but nothing has really changed overall. I immediately, right away, saw a big pickup in inquiries because there was a direct, clear next step. Now, I'm just talking about at that very front end of your website. I'm not talking about like when people contact me. Although if somebody contacts me and I send them a Calendly link, they're going to book either way. I don't get people dropping off at that point in the process. But at the website level, there's something so specific about that call to action, click here and book a meeting, that just is simple for people. There's something that I find really ambiguous, or for some reason I find just based on the results that I see from my clients, having like a contact form and just saying contact me, or even worse, just having an email address and say get in touch with us. It's so open to interpretation about what happens next. What am I supposed to do? At what point am I ready to contact this architect? That people just sort of procrastinate on it and don't do it. They delay. They just kind of. That's my theory anyway, that people go, oh, there isn't a clear sense of when I should do this, why I should do this, and what I should say, and what happens next. Whereas there's something so specific about the Calendly that it's like, this is the next step, do this now, that people go, okay, cool, that's the next step. And for some reason, that's my theory, but I think it leads to people doing it. I haven't seen resistance. I'm sure there's a few people that are like, oh, I don't want to do the Calendly. In particular, for me, time zones are an issue. I won't go into it too much, but Calendly doesn't work so well when I'm in Melbourne and somebody else is in another time zone. They're looking at a lot of the days that it says are available, and they're seeing like 2 a.m, 3 a.m. That's frustrating for them to have to look through each of those days and see nothing available that's suitable for them. That's why I think SavvyCal is better if you're doing different time zones, because it shows the entire work week as like a big graphic where you could visually see when a time's available. Whereas Calendly just has like little dots on each day on the calendar that don't give you any information about what times are available. So yeah, I think, but I think for most architects that won't be an issue. And everybody knows how to use online booking now because of the pandemic and everything, whether you're booking your doctor, you're booking your hair appointment, whatever you're doing, walk-ins are a thing of the past. Bookings are the way that we do things now. Everybody knows and is comfortable now booking stuff online using these services. So I think go for it. And I see great results when clients start implementing this on their sites and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's very good insight about the removing the contact form or the email, because I have both on my website. I have a Calendly pop-up link and then I have a contact form, and I think people use a contact form more often than not. But it would, from a sales perspective, having them face to face on the Zoom call would be much better anyway.
Yeah.
And we could have a 5-minute Zoom call and like figure out what the next steps is.
Calendly is awesome. It sets up the Zoom event. It does the email reminders. It sends them the calendar event. Like, it does everything. It's so good. And when I get to my number one thing, I'm gonna talk about how it's even better. But let's what's your number one, Arnaud? What's your number one area of marketing?
Drum roll.
Yeah, go for it.
For me, it's how I started everything, and it's what I still do to an extent to this day, not nearly as much as I once did, but it's just good old cold calling and talking to people and reaching out and following up and selling the old fashioned way, because it just works. It's a lot of work. And if you're a savvy marketer like yourself, and you've been able to set up your business with an SEO system that works, and you get inquiries without having to do anything, and it's all automated, more power to you. But I think it's a great way to learn how to sell. It works, and when you have nothing else, you can always fall back on it. So I think it's a very valuable tool. People don't use it as much. People think the phone is a thing of the past, but there's nothing like having someone on the phone and trying to schedule a meeting or something to sell them, and that will teach you how to handle rejection like nothing else.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there's so much that if you are doing commercial work or business to business work as a practice, cold email and cold calling is actually going through quite a renaissance at the moment. I mean, you're not going to hear it from the marketing gurus, but like, if you actually have your sort of finger on the pulse of what's working really well at the moment, those techniques are really coming back into vogue. They're starting to work again. They're working really, really effectively. A lot of people in the sort of the practitioner side of marketing are kind of like losing interest in social media and kind of gaining interest in sales, because sales it's still works really, really well if you've got a really good offer. It's not something that you see architects doing that much of, but I think there's definitely some value to learning more
Yeah.
about it.
Well, what I've seen is that a lot of the people I talk to are terrified of doing it, or they think they can't
Yeah.
do it, or they think
Yeah.
they don't have what it takes. But it couldn't be further from the truth, because it's not rocket science. It's a skill you can learn and teach yourself. There's a million books out there. And like writing, it just takes practice. You're going to get rejected and it sucks. But once you get your first sale, it's sweet. And
Yeah.
then every
Yeah.
sale after that is even sweeter.
Yep.
And I don't think it ever went away. I just think people, because there's kind of two things in the marketing world. In like the corporate marketing world, there's a whole segment of that industry that thinks that online marketing and ads and all the digital social media tool is a be all and all. But the reality is that the numbers show that it's absolutely not as effective as more traditional ways of marketing and selling. And you have to spend an inordinate amount of money to generate any work. And worst of all, the huge majority of the money that's poured into online advertising is pure fraud. Like it's just a mob stealing your money. Cold calling, cold emailing, reaching out to people, shaking hands, kissing babies, it just works. And I think it never went away. I think as a whole segment of that industry kind of turned up its nose at it, but people who know how to sell never stop doing it.
Yeah.
And I think now that people are really realizing how bad online advertising is and online marketing, how ineffective it is compared to what it was supposed to be 20 years ago, and it was the promise of this whole new frontier that was going to open up the world of marketing. None of that has happened. So I think maybe it's going through some kind of resurgence in some circle, but I think in general it's never going to go away, because it relies on human psychology. And until we're cyborgs and we find ways to genetically modified humans to a point where traditional psychology no longer applies, it's still going to work. So
Yeah.
it's a safe bet.
I think at even a really basic level, right? Like the value of every architect learning about, say, for example, cold email, right? Is maybe not even cold email for the purpose of trying to approach clients directly, but there's a particular aspect of cold email that everybody needs, which is follow up. Like, how do you actually process leads? How do you follow up with people who are not responding to your fee proposals? How do you follow up people that contacted you that now it's been a couple of days later after you emailed them suggesting that you have a call and then they haven't responded to you? Because most architects would assume that that person like wasn't actually interested, but the reality is that you just actually need to be pretty persistent when it comes to getting people through the sales process. A lot of the time, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be a bad client at all. It doesn't mean that at all. People are just really busy, and people have thousands of emails a day, and then you're not the only thing they're currently paying for. Trust me, they have a lot of different things that they're currently buying, and you're just one of them. And so there's improving those skills so that you're not like hopeless when it comes to getting people like better positioned to take action. I think is value of learning about cold email, but also cold email being used to actually build relationships. Again, go back to the idea of maybe it's not the direct client, but it could be that collaborator that you could have sort of an informal sort of partnership with and refer business, or either way. I think a lot of architects take advantage of that really nicely if they build good relationships in the industry. But how you actually initially reach out to people is going to be like a key element of whether or not you end up building a relationship with that person. Yeah. So learning about it, building confidence doing it. I did a lot of cold email when I first started my business. It's how I got all my first clients because I had no digital presence. And it at first was uncomfortable, but have become so comfortable at doing it now that I don't hesitate to send somebody 3 follow-up emails. Like, does not, it's completely no, no skin off my teeth whatsoever to be persistent with people, to not just allow things to just get forgotten about.
Yeah.
And so I see that as the like long-term benefit of like learning
Oh,
about that area.
yeah, yeah. And what's important to know about reaching out outside of all those digital platforms like email and phone calls is that on average it takes 7 touches with a potential clients before you make a sell. So that persistence is key because that's how you're going to get your jobs. And those 7 touches can be over a year, 2 or 3 years. It doesn't matter, but persistence, and that's is what matters. And that's what I've been saying for years is I don't give up until someone tells me either yes or fuck off.
Yeah.
Really. And if they don't say yes, then it means there's an action item for 3, 6 months, a year down the road, because I always ask them, okay, now is not the right time. When is a good time to reach?
Yeah.
And sometimes they say, I don't really know. So I just put 6 months down the road or something. Sometimes they're very clear and they say, oh, I got nothing for another 8 months. So I make a note and then I call in 8 months. And then sure enough, 8 months later, I call. And they never really tell me, but I'm pretty sure that the fact that you're doing what you say 8 months later
Yeah.
is a huge leg up, because 99% of people don't do it, or they either forget.
Definitely.
And to do that, you have to have the right tools too.
You have to have the right tools. You have to be organized. You have to have a game plan. As far as that stuff, the thing that I like in terms of digital marketing versus sales or cold email or whatever. The downside of the cold email approach is that when you stop doing it, or when you lose momentum, or when you run out of contacts, like that's the end of the line. Like you are not gaining clients if that is the only thing that you're doing. So it's like a balance of making sure that, if you say, for example, you were just doing cold outreach, making sure that you're not just cold outreaching to potential clients, but you're cold outreaching to those potential partners, because there's going to be a long-term repeat business that will come from that. And you're building up like something that there's a positive feedback loop that will continue to run even if you take your foot off the gas, right? Yeah. Whereas like if you're just reaching out to potential client after potential client, if you send 100 emails and you get 85 no's and 5 meetings and 5 clients or whatever, like that's what you got out of that. The other 85 are probably not going to like remember you from that email exchange they had with you 2 years ago. You need to continue. You need something else in your marketing that's going to like build on top of that. But I think really like, I do have a sort of a marketing setup where leads tend to come to me because I've got my blog and my podcast and stuff like that. But every now and then I still do cold outreach, because I occasionally want to like kind of put my hand on the rudder and steer in a direction of a certain type of client. Like I want to be strategic and go, there are this type of firm in the UK that I'm not getting a lot of them coming to me at the moment, but I really want to build that area of my client like portfolio. I want to work with a few firms like that. So I will make a sort of a strategic choice to spend, maybe to email 15 different firms and kind of strike up a conversation, or do like a little video for their website or something. I'll put myself out there, because I do want to be somewhat in control. I don't just want to be sitting there waiting for like work to come to me from wherever it comes from. So really targeted outreach. And I don't think like either of us are suggesting that any architect should start, sending like 2,000 emails a week or anything, but like very occasionally picking individual people who you think could be that like key that would unlock like a whole new direction of your practice, and then reaching out to them in like a really specific way, in a really personal, warm, informed way, like researching that person, not just like spray and pray, let's contact like shitloads of people and see what happens, but really going out there with purpose.
And so there's 2 quick things I want to add to that. Going back to the strategic partnerships, every successful firm does it. All the commercial interior design firms, they all work with brokers. There's tons of strategic partnerships you can set up, and the smart ones all do it. So that's a very good idea. And the other thing is that the targeted approach to cold emailing or cold calling, that takes us back to LinkedIn too, because you can creep people, and not in a negative way. It's just a funny too. You can create people, follow them, see what they do,
Yep.
and then you can reach out and maybe you can ask a common connection to introduce you. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's another thing I will point out, that a lot of the cold email experts these days are actually saying that it's better off doing it on LinkedIn. Like actually, it's better to actually sometimes contact people directly through LinkedIn rather than through email. So yeah, no, it's an interesting one. Okay, so my number one, probably the most boring of the tools, but Zapier or Zapier is amazing. So it's an app that connects any online app to any other online app. So you can say, when something happens on this app, do something else on this app. So an example of it, I've got a couple of examples. This is my sequence of events that happens when somebody books a Calendly meeting through my website. So whenever somebody books that 15-minute meeting, it sends a trigger to Zapier. And what Zapier does is it adds a person to my CRM on Airtable. It sets up a new meeting note in my note-taking system in Notion. It sends me a text message to notify me that there's been a new client booking. It adds that person to my email newsletter in Sendy or Mailchimp. And it also sets up a customer in my billing software, so that when it comes time to send them an invoice, if they decide to work with me, that's like a click of one button to do that. So it's like a pretty amazing steps, that all happen automatically and instantly the second that somebody books a meeting. So that's really good.
That is grandmaster level of automation.
Yeah, so automation. That's right. So that's what Zapier is all about. It's all about automating different things. The other one that I find really helpful that all of my clients kind of comment on is that meeting reminders for every event on my calendar. So if I have an event on my calendar coming up that has a Zoom meeting that I created, it'll send a 48-hour meeting reminder, which reminds people of like my cancellation policy, and it also gives them my the Zoom link for the meeting in case, so they don't have to go digging around to find it. And then 24 hours before, it sends them a Google survey to collect their marketing information for that month. So like, how many leads did they get? What's their website traffic? So all of this like processing I have to do around each of my individual meetings, I've set up a Zapier process that just does all of that. So that could be if you had a specific type of meeting that you'll often sign, like you'll be doing with your clients, let's say an initial client meeting, you could set up a Zapier whenever there's an initial client meeting, maybe send them this email, then send them this email, then after the meeting, send them this email with another Calendly link for the next step in the process, or any number of things that you could do. You could even connect it to, if you use an online kind of contract or proposal product like Quilla or Bonsai, there's a few out there. You could connect it to there and say, after this meeting, automatically set up a draft proposal. Like, so many different automations can happen using Zapier. So it's number one for me. I think of all the things that I pay for every month, and there are many, that would be the one that I would be like the most reluctant to cancel, I think. So yeah, it's like the number one for me. It saves me so much time.
It sounds like that's ripe for a creation of another C-suite title. It's the Chief Automation Officer.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about that at the moment, that I sometimes feel, I'm so into these online tools. I remember early on a client saying to me, like, you would probably be more successful if you just did like automation and app consulting for businesses rather than marketing, because like there's so, when you kind of are aware of these different apps and tools and how to use them, it can make you like a little bit superpowered in your business. Like, you don't need to be spending much time.
Have you ever thought of exploring that niche, like even on the side?
Maybe that'll be when I retire.
Because honestly, I think that's a brilliant niche. I know very little. I mean, I do some automation, so I'm not going to say I know nothing, but I'm not at your level of mastery.
Thanks,
just hearing you talk about that makes me think like that's a Blair Enns level of niche mastery that you could go after and be extremely successful at and charge a ton of money for, because you literally save your clients tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years if you do that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, I think so. I just like architects too much, man. And they don't have that much stuff to automate. Not that much. that we could make it work. I think like a lot of your company processes, as your practice gets a little bit bigger, then yes, like a lot of things would be like ripe to be automated. But I just like small practices too much, and they just don't have that much to automate. But what I don't even get that many of my clients signing up for Zapier, honestly, because but in the marketing space, one of the things that they do tend to always value is just like, particularly with email marketing, like connecting it to your website so that, you know, or when you have a new lead come in, like it goes to your CRM, it goes to your Mailchimp, it goes whatever else you need like a new lead to do. It's just one of the most simple parts of the process. But yeah, aside from that, you know, maybe we'll have to look into it. But yeah, I think Zapier is really cool, and you can do a free trial, and you can automate up to like 5 different apps or something. You can create 5 automations, so you don't have to pay for it to get some value out of it. So I think it's like pretty handy for everybody. So that's it, man. That's my top 5. Nitro Pack, Mailchimp Journeys, Later, Calendly, and Zapier. And yours were, trying to remember, what's your top 5?
I threw my list out. So
Okay, don't worry about the list. Let's leave it there. What's our next?
No, it was LinkedIn,
Yep.
SEO, podcasting, blogging, and cold calling.
In order of importance. I love it.
Yeah.
Our next one is going to be, we might be thinking about advertising. We could do video, we could do podcasts, or we could do measuring. So everybody will see you in the next video.
It'll
next
be
month.
a surprise, one of these. Thanks, David.
All right.
It was really good. I'm looking forward to the next one.
You too, man.